things that happened. The first is not related to a bill, but just maybe some work that I've been trying to do in the last week or so, and I think there's some momentum this way. Amendment G, there were a couple of aspects to it. One of those aspects was that each year the legislature would take the base budget, which is what was spent on public education the year prior, factor in any enrollment growth, and put an inflationary adjustment. And I think it's based on a rural CPI less energy, you know. But there's an inflationary adjustment, and then that money would be put into the Uniform School Fund. Uniform School Fund by Constitution can only be spent on public education K-12. It cannot be spent on higher ed. So that was one of the outcomes of our discussions with the legislature 2 years ago, and then that was kind of ratified with Amendment G passing in November of 21, I think it was. No, 20, November of 20. Well, the second part of Amendment G is, in order to be able to provide that assurance that every year they would fund not only the base budget but enrollment growth and an inflationary adjustment, they felt, and it's wise, that there needed to be, the layman's term would be an ongoing rainy day fund. The technical term they've used is an economic stabilization fund. So this is an ongoing revenue stream that in the event the economy won't allow for base budget enrollment growth and inflationary adjustment to be funded, they can just pull from that economic stabilization fund, that ongoing rainy day fund, and cover those expenses in a bad time. So go back to 2008, 9, 10, it would give some cushion so that we'd still be able to take care of those things. Now, any year that the ongoing money is not needed, it's available as a one-time expense, as a one-time fund. Does that make sense? They're putting the ongoing money in this revenue stream, but if it's not needed this year, this year's money could be available as a one-time expense. Last year was the first year that was in place, but the legislature determined how that would be used, and it was used wisely for teacher bonuses. That drew from that economic stabilization money. That's where that money came from. It was $127 million last year. This year there's $128 million in there. And there hadn't been any real plan on that. There have been different discussions about how to handle that money. And I've worked with a few different people and just recommended that I felt like the wisest distribution of that would be through the weighted pupil unit. And in order to make sure that the rural districts had a reasonable amount of revenue, that included in that would be NESS funding, which means necessarily existent small schools. We don't benefit from that, but I thought that was the fair thing to do.
We do a little
for our rurals. Barely. We have a few WPUs at Snowcrest.
We're the only ones that shows.
Right. So we'd get a tiny bit, but it really is a fairness issue to our rural districts.
When you look at the whole state,
right.
I'm trying to play well.
And so on Friday, and Janice was with me, at our JLC meeting, and I made a proposal, kind of explained some of that, made a proposal to the group that we direct our leadership to draft a letter to legislative leadership stating this is our recommendation to distribute that. My point has been, if we don't move on this in the next 2 weeks, legislators will either determine, number one, we don't need this, or number two, we don't know how to distribute it. And so the WPU formula seems to be to me, the fair way, and there's a lot of momentum around that. I know Ben Leishman, legislative fiscal analyst, supports that approach. Now USBA, USSA supported that approach. So the point of that is, if it's distributed using that formula, Robert, my very quick calculation is we could get close to $6 million. One time money, and it would be capital expense.
I had somewhere between 6 and 7.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was conservative, and I'm glad to know that
You're the ball.
maybe I've been more conservative than you. That's-
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm sorry.
Let's put that on the calendar.
I know.
No kidding.
But
Put
the other about it
that,
is,
put that in the logbook.
Jeff was wise to nominate, put the NES small schools money, because the purpose that they're trying to earmark this for is capital needs, which is a good one-time need.
It's one-time,
Everyone has, and without it, the small districts wouldn't have enough to do anything, or very little.
More conservative.
Just out of curiosity.
I know you're stuck on
The
that.
extra cookies you take home.
Those are Matt cookies, by the way.
They are?
Yeah, they're steel.
So, we're in a position now because of previous legislation where premium is limited.
Yeah.
This could be some nice cushion for, well, yeah, for our capital projects on the bond.
Is there any traction to reverse that?
It's not fair.
It's not only not fair, it's not only not fair, it's not wise. It's not, when you look at conservative principles, one of those conservative principles is don't mess with the market. Let the market play by its own rules, and that's what premium does. But
That's why I wondered if anybody had brought that up since that passed, or if there's any, if it's gaining
Take a look
traction
at it
to
again.
change that back to how it was.
I can rewrite a bill next year. I might not say it's in
Wasn't
their
the Howard
hands, but.
Stevenson deal?
it was
Yeah.
very much.
And the
It
state
was very
treasurer.
much, and then he got the state treasurer involved, and the state treasurer, became aggressive,
Yeah. But
So, but it is what it is.
Was that Dave
That's,
Dempsey?
yes,
Dave
But
Dempsey.
now he's not there.
yes.
Well,
This is, I know this is probably history and I don't know, but is there a percentage, how much is committed by the legislature to that stabilization fund?
They put a ceiling, and I think their ceiling is 400 million. And they're not quite there yet, but they've gotten there a lot quicker than they ever anticipated.
Really?
So
Is-
all they've done, they haven't designated a percentage to flow into that, but they have designated a ceiling.
And so is it at their discretion yearly?
Yes.
How much goes into that
Yes,
stabilization?
is up to 400 million. So they're
Okay.
trying to, and they've done a good job the first 2 years to balance how much money is available, what's needed in terms of the enrollment growth, inflationary adjustment based budget, plus WPU increase,
Right.
and then, put the balance in there. But once it's in there, that's also in the uniform school fund, so it has to be used for K-12 public ed.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Great question. Anyway, the point is, if that goes through, I think it gives us a little bit of a cushion on capital for our project.
I think that's a positive thing, if you look at the growth and the change, our capital improvement committee is dealing with that with Scott, with some of those major challenges.
if you don't want to fool.
But there's not a better time to get that,
Right.
and really have Jeff's work down there and make sure that he educates. There was a little struggle, as he explained it to me, because others didn't want to do that, including that small group, you know what I mean?
So are there other ideas? Capital improvements could use it for sure.
Oh,
You've got some small rural districts that don't want to. And so what they were saying is, let's make that a pot of money available for competitive bid. And then you can build a school from that.
A whole school.
And I said, there's $127 million in there this year.
Right.
We're building one high school
Right,
that
that
we're
we
struggling
even-
to bring it in at $170 million. So it wouldn't build a high school.
Right.
And now can you imagine
Oh.
41 school districts
Right.
trying to
Bidding for it.
descend on this,
One,
you know,
yeah.
really
Yep.
relatively small amount of money.
books.
And yet if it's distributed to
Right, the whole.
districts, now, you know, everybody has capital improvement needs, building security upgrade needs. You could use it on back-end technology needs. You know, any one-time capital expense, everybody will benefit. And it's why I included the NES in the proposal to make sure that the,
Do you think we'll get any pushback from the charters? Because they don't get an S.
correct. I think there's a lot of momentum for this in the legislature when, you know,
Yeah, I think so.
but I think leadership now is kind of supporting this concept of get the money out,
Yep.
get the money out. Let locals use this money because they need it.
Yeah.
House Bill 114, it's a school nursing services amendment. It's a good one. Representative Suzanne, isn't it, Janice? Suzanne Harrison. This would make some adjustments in the ratio of nurse to students in schools and increase the number of nurses. It's relatively small, but anything, you know,
Oh,
if we could
gosh,
get,
yeah.
if we could get one or two,
Yeah.
you know,
That'd really be helpful.
even one nurse out of this, this would be a
Does
positive
it come with
for us.
funding?
It does,
Okay.
yeah. And again, you know, with these bills, what, the bill can pass and have a fiscal note attached to it, and when executive appropriations meets later on,
They just say.
you know, the bill could pass and the fiscal note is not funded. And that
That's
sometimes
interesting.
happens.
And so then it can't
The bill
happen.
passed, and there's no money.
So what do they do? What do we do?
Didn't
We do it.
It's an empty
Wasn't
bill.
it Governor Levitt that complained about federal unfunded mandates, isn't that kind of the?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but this is one that, it doesn't have a large fiscal note to it.
To it anyway.
And so, you know, hopefully that would go. Another one that's been in the news just a little bit, I just wanna make you aware, House Bill 162, period products in schools. This is Representative Lisenby, Carrie Ann Lisenby. She's got a lot of private partnership in this as well. I know Gail Miller has been very involved, very supportive. There's some other private partnerships in communities around the state to match some of the funding that would come from the state for some of the initial costs associated with dispensing machines that would go in. But at issue here is that there are families that don't have resources, and therefore they're young girls that are staying home from school, and we just don't want that. So, you know, I know there's been some discussion about local control and those kind of things, but this to me is not a topic to jump into that whole local control. If we can help young girls and make sure that they're, you know, in a lot of schools will say, well, we've got them in the office. We've got those,
They won't ask.
they won't ask, they won't go, they'll just, you know, and so, again, not a large fiscal note attached to it. Steve Waldrop, HB 193, a full-day kindergarten. Right now in the state, the reason we have half-day kindergarten is the legislature only reimburses school districts 0.55 of a WPU. So that's why there's half-day kindergarten. So what Steve's Representative Waldrop's bill would do is keep it optional. Kindergarten will still remain optional in Utah, but give every family the option of a full-day kindergarten. Now, there's two challenges associated with that. One, and I support it, you know, that is a good thing to allow every family the option of full-day kindergarten. One challenge is teacher shortage. You know, we'd have to find more kindergarten teachers. And the second part of that is capital space. And so, you know, go up above, that's something down the road, some of that capital, one-time capital money that may be necessary in a couple of our schools to, you know, build some additional classroom space.
Jeff, are
We
they looking
have-
at anything to do with, non-certified in that area?
Say that again?
I don't think so.
Non-certified
A non-certified teacher in kindergarten, I
No,
haven't heard that.
we'd-
I had somebody ask me that.
We'd still have, now I want you to think about, the local, that Larry does, our.
LEA.
LEA, license, you
Okay.
still have that flexibility, you know,
Well, I'm just thinking about the shortage, and I had a
Yeah.
parent ask me,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
kindergarten, is it really necessary to have?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
I think,
absolutely,
yeah,
more necessary there
absolutely.
than, more than any,
Yes.
yes. Yeah, this isn't, you know, what we went through, I listened to Bambi and take a nap and, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
those
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of things. I
That
mean,
was
this is-
Sleep pressures twice a
this
day.
is, you know,
We
these
had
children
cookies.
are,
We had cookies and bananas.
Cookies delivered.
We just had graham crackers.
Oh, yeah, grab
We were
that.
lucky if we got soda crack.
In our
Yeah.
elementary school, we did calculus.
For you, I could believe that.
So Dave Hill says that we lose kindergartners to charters, because the charters that are in our community have full day kindergarten. And so parents want that, and especially when they're working, and so we're losing the charters on that.
yeah. Many states have that as an option.
Does it change the funding, does that change the
Yes,
funding?
yes, it would,
Good.
it would, yeah. So it's a significant ask, you know, it's not an ask, but there would be
Yeah,
a
whatever.
substantial
Good.
fiscal note
And
attached
in
to
that,
it.
because right now we have full day in our Title I, and then we have 3 other schools. There's an optional extended day kindergarten grant that we give that
Mhm.
funds an additional 3
So
of our
10.
schools.
What
So
are those
10, the Valley View, Riverdale, and West Haven. So we tried to pick the next 3 kind of most impacted schools to provide all day kinder, and they love, you know, the parents and the staff and everybody loves that all day kinder, so. So
But
that
a
at
lot
least
of
we
those have not preschool, so that was kind of the thought behind that at one time.
Right.
My grandkids come from Texas and it's not an option.
In
They're all
Texas,
day.
you're in all day.
They're in all day.
Yeah.
It's a good balance,
It
I
is.
think, to have the optional. There are very few ever
That
in
don't.
our, that have been at one of those that offer full day,
That don't take.
that don't take it. So, you know, it's there as an option if you don't want your child
They
there all
can-
day, but very, very few.
I can't
I'll bet
The
you could.
children love it.
I can't think of
They do.
one
It takes a
family
different
that's
level, yeah.
not taking advantage of it, yeah.
I have a little granddaughter in full day kindergarten right now, and she
Yeah.
loves it.
They do.
The next 2 bills are bills again that you know you've heard a lot about, certainly from our teachers, and understandably so. House Bill 234, which is a public educator curriculum transparency requirement. This is the one that Representative Tusher sponsored, that would have required teachers to post class syllabus to be made available online, including a description of learning materials. And he was trying to state, well, Canvas will just do that, you know, just Canvas has all that material. Many of our elementary teachers are not using Canvas, that, you know, it would fall heavy to them. I know there was a lot of pushback, and he's pulled that bill.
It just is so counterintuitive to, being responsive to a child's needs. Cause
Well,
when
good
it says,
teaching
we're gonna
practices, yeah.
press on whether they've got it or not.
I like that. be or creates a path for parents to take advantage of, which is just a nightmare.
It was a problem.
Yeah.
It was a problem. So again, the sponsors pulled that bill. Senate Bill 114 has some similarities. Senator Fillmore, about to sneeze. Senator Fillmore is sponsoring that. I think he has made a better effort to connect with school districts and teachers and so forth. His requirement is more on the front end when a school district adopts a text. Number one, to make sure that you've included parents in that adoption process. We've always tried to do that. And number two, when the text is adopted, the board would have to vote on that adoption and hold a public comment section.
I find that agreeable. Do you find that agreeable?
I don't see anything wrong with that.
I like it on the front end.
Yeah, so it's not impactful to teachers. It's, and quite frankly, I don't see it very impactful to us. We have a process for textbook adoption, and we've always included parents on
That's
that
been happening for
forever in this
for as
district.
long as I
Community
know.
councils, is that the parents, community councils?
There would be probably a committee, right?
Yeah, we just, usually what we've done, I know when I was curriculum director, I would invite a school in each cone, for example, to invite a parent or two on the committee. So we just wanted parent representation on those textbook adoption committees. So for us, that wouldn't change anything. We have voted on adoptions. We've always voted on the adoption. Sometimes it's been in the consent calendar. This would probably move it, in my opinion, out of the consent calendar to an action item. And I would see it similar to what we're going to go through tonight with the fees. That there's a presentation on the adoption, and then a public comment section, and then a board vote.
It must be, I figure if someone comes forward with this bill, it must be an issue in other districts. That they are trying to encourage them to do it more as you're describing.
I think that we've seen in the last 2 school years, groups that have wanted, more involvement and have more say, and some, I think, go too far. There was a bill released today. It's in Senate rules right now, that Senate Bill 157 by Senator Johnson, that is
Our senator?
Yes. It's a parental rights in public education. I'll be careful because I'm being recorded. It states that states have sovereignty, that they are not beholden to the federal government, and so none of those regulations, for example, with special education, none of those apply. And it opens the door for any parent to sue a district, a school, or a teacher if they disagree with the curriculum.
Where were they on
So
the front end?
you throw out IDEA, special education,
Yeah.
because we have, it just, so I think what Senator Fillmore has done, Janice, is try to find some reasonable, try to be responsive to parental concerns, do it on the front end of an adoption, where the burden, so to speak, would be on a school district. And I just don't see it as a problem. I would welcome anybody who had input on an adoption. So that's 114. So right now 234 has been pulled. Doesn't mean it can't come back, but It doesn't look to me like it's going to come back.
Especially with 114 there.
And I think that's kind of, I think Representative Tusher can see some more momentum, more support around 114. And then the last one I'll mention is Senator Milner's Early Literacy Outcomes Improvement Bill. This is a K-3. Ann's done a lot of research really looking especially at Mississippi and some things that they've done to gather some statewide coalitions that were public-private partnerships, really trying to align research-based practice in the science of reading and the science of reading instruction.
That have to do with the letters program?
It involves the letters program for sure.
Okay.
I was just talking to Christy Wagner just a few minutes ago. We have, Jenny, about half of our K-3 teachers who are trained right now. And we're early in that process, but about half of our K-3 teachers are trained. I'd like to see, and I've given Christy a couple of suggestions, a little greater flexibility with the state in how that training and when that training is offered. I think that whether that's NUCC or LEA based, I think that there could be some options, where that type of training, but this will probably have a $10-12 million fiscal note attached to it, which in the end isn't a huge amount of money to make a huge difference.
If I had a couple of teachers reach out to me, it would impact our reading coaches. Do you see that? Devaluing them?
I don't.
Okay, thank you.
In fact, I see it. I see that it would reinforce what's happening in Weber District.
Okay, thank you.
Because there's been such great leadership, and here's a former reading coach, but such great leadership from Sue Porter to Becky Oki to Christy Wagner, working with our reading coaches. They are absolutely focused on the science of reading instruction, the science of reading. I could see that there might be some other LEAs that it could be a real benefit to them, that they haven't been maybe as laser focused on some of those best practices, and this would bring some of that into alignment for them. Jan, I see this being a reinforcement of what we're doing. Correct.
Okay.
I could kind of see Weber District taking the lead
Thank you.
in some of that.
Just a comment regarding that, the textbook adoption, we get public input and then vote. My preference would be when we get public input, at least wait a month.
That's a
before
great
we vote.
idea. That's a great
When we get
idea.
input and then we write it,
So-
it's like, we don't care what you say, we're
Yeah.
not.
Exactly.
It could be
I'm
similar,
comfortable with that.
I like it, Doug, and it's a similar thing, for example, to a first reading.
First reading.
Or,
Yeah.
but that's a great idea.
Which we're gonna have tonight, and then we'll have the second reading next month.
Right.
On the
On
PC.
fees.
It gives us some
On
time to
fees.
evaluate what.
Or we get feedback.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a great suggestion.
just before we talked just a second about not to change it, but the consent calendar.
Yes.
Did you read that letter from our purchasing agent?
Let's find out, Robert.
The consent calendar said we didn't go out to bid, we didn't follow policy, and that's what the auditors wrote us up on the.
I talked, I figured as much, but I conferred with Seth. The auditors, the compliance rule typically apply to grants. And that's what the auditors look at as grants. This is not, this ain't compliance, doesn't apply to this. And this is fundraised money, the bulk of it. There is some school money, but the bulk is fundraised money. And so what we're gonna do is work with our schools to make sure that they are constantly making sure they got the best deal.
So here's the issue, just to, we've got the Fremont drill and cheer teams who are traveling, so the board had approved their out-of-state travel request. But when they were putting plans together to travel, they didn't go out to bid for different companies. And Dax pointed that out in the letter. And, you know, part of the challenge, Robert helped us see, is that the money was coming in waves, and so none of it was rising above that, you know,
I see the
threshold of
threshold.
requiring a bid.
Right.
So the
I
money's
see.
coming in waves. It's either personal money or fundraised money, it's not grant money.
Oh, I see.
So,
But we'll work with them, make sure that they're still bidding and get the best deal possible.
so is Seth comfortable with the board
He is.
Moving
approving,
forward.
Yep.
approving that?
Seth says yes.
Okay, so if we're protected, then
And
I
that's
guess
in
we
the
move
consent
forward.
calendar that we
Yeah.
Yeah, it
approved.
is. Yeah, I saw that.
Are you okay with that, Doug, if we
Yeah.
move forward with that?
Yeah,
If they say we're covered?
yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I'm gonna emphasize that with our, especially our high school principals, that really raised a significant concern with our board, and they've gotta be, that they have got to go through a process to, and they'll get a better,
Yeah.
they'll get a better price.
So the parents of the kids get the best deal, cause
Yeah.
we have a granddaughter, Lakeette, and that's a strain on the
Expense.
budget of
It is.
the parents,
It's a
I
big
tell you.
I
expense.
had four girls. Now, the challenge is, now we're gonna create us to be on that watch log for 3 years.
The previous
auditors.
one, not this one.
Right,
this
but
one, previous.
potentially, and that's what creates that headache. When we'd like to be down to nothing, and
Yeah.
so when you talk about stress on the board, there's a couple other things playing a part in that too.
Yep.
So what part of it was raised funds and what part of it was school funds percentage?
Seth
you know?
says, 95.
It would be very, very, the only school fund would be for, the advisor, to go
To cover
over.
her costs.
Pay for the cost.
Yeah, yeah. So the students are raising all their own funds, so very
But if
little.
they can't, then we still have to.
Fee
we have to
waivers.
Fee waivers,
Yeah.
there's fee waivers too, has to be
Isn't
covered.
that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
They can't afford it.
Anything else?
That's all I have, President.
All right, thank you. You got a few minutes to get ready.
Jeff, I have a question on the upcoming meeting.
I have to tell you this, you're the one
See that.
that is making these reservations.
Well, travel agents.
Here's the deal, and it's no big deal except.
I just like to see it. I like to see how they
I
like
have a D in my address.
Okay, I will let her know that.
Because when I did it,
And then bring
I will
foundation.
have.
perfect, so it would be both here and
Certainly, I
here.
think it would be understood about
These are, well,
Okay.
It's all good.
I'm
I'm sure.
D.
Oh.
Definitely